Hi, this is Mr. Curtis, and today's topic is something called karyotypes. Well, what are karyotypes? Karyotype is an arrangement of paired chromosomes from largest pair to smallest pair. And if you remember, a chromosome is a chapter of DNA. DNA in many animals is broken down into these chapters, groups, and so on. And it just so happens, if you remember, that in humans we have how many chapters of DNA? Let me get my pen color correctly here. We have 46 chapters, 46 chromosomes in every body cell. And if you remember in sperm or egg cell, that would be then how many? 23. So when you have sperm and egg combine, then you get a new person with 46. What are the steps to doing a karyotype? First of all, as you follow along here, there's a tissue sample that's taken, and we'll get into that in class as to where these are taken from. Chemicals are added, and then these chemicals and the cells are allowed to incubate for several days. Then, as it says here, the other chemicals are added, and you want them to stop in mitosis in metaphase. So if you remember, there's 5 stages that we talked about, So metaphase is the middle stage. Then the cells are transferred, and then some more things are happened. Then they put on a slide, microscope slide, and then they take a photograph of them. And then we get something that looks like this. So this is a photograph of a person's chromosomes. Now to you or I right now, this doesn't mean much. The next step is what we are going to be doing. We are going to be taking these chromosomes and arranging them in pairs from largest pair to smallest pair, and then that'll give us some information about this person. Once they're arranged, then we can get some information. And how do you end up and arrange them? Well, I'm not going to go through this whole sheet, but this is the sheet that you are going to use when you are doing a karyotype. You're going to break the groups of chromosomes down into these letter groups, and you're going to look at these characteristics. Basically, you're looking at the length of the chromosome, and then you also are looking at where these X's are. That's something called the centromere, which I'm going to show you a picture of in just a second here. This is a blown up picture of a typical chromosome. What we're looking at is that some chromosomes will be really long, like so, and then this thing in the center where the X's seem to come together, that's called the centromere. In some chromosomes, you'll see something like this, where the centromere is towards one end. And sometimes it'll appear like the centromere is way down at the one far end. So we're going to look at all of these characteristics to help us when it comes to arranging these chromosomes. The other thing we're going to be looking at are these bands. Many times when a karyotype is done, certain chemicals are used, and you can see these bands on the chromosomes. That also is going to help us when it comes to arranging these chromosomes. Now this is a completed karyotype, and you can see that they basically go from largest pair, chromosome number 1, down to smallest pair, chromosome number 22. Then also we have this extra pair here. That's the 23rd pair, and that's a special pair which we're going to get into right now. This is another karyotype with different chemicals that are used, and you can see that the banding shows up a lot better than in the previous one. If I can get to that one here. So here we have chromosomes where you can't really see much banding. That has to do with the chemicals that were used. Whereas this one, you can see it quite clearly. Now, what can a karyotype tell us? What kind of information? Well, primarily, a karyotype will tell us the sex of the person. How the heck do you do that? Well, again, we look at these last chromosome pair, the 23rd pair. And here's how it works. If you have two really medium-sized chromosomes, like so, that's going to be a girl. That's going to be a female. If you have one that's relatively long, but one that's really short, that's going to be a male. Now, oftentimes, this female is called XX, and the male is called XY. Now, stop for a second, and I want you to think about who determines the sex of the child. Remember that only one chromosome will go to each, one chromosome pair, will go to each sperm or egg cell. So from here, mom has an X and an X, dad has an X and a Y. I want you to stop for a second and think about who actually determines the sex of the child. Now, moving on, I want to show you another karyotype, and this is the one which is a male. Notice that you have a long X chromosome and you have a short Y chromosome. Now, as you do a karyotype, how are you going to be able to tell these all apart? Here's a little clue that I like to use. If you have, as I call them, 5 teeny tinies, really small chromosomes. If there's 5 teeny tinies, that's going to be a male. So look here, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 really short ones. That will tell you that you have a male, assuming that you have the correct number of chromosomes. Whereas if you were looking at a female, here's another one, you notice that there are only 4 teeny tinies. You have 2 medium-sized X chromosomes. So if you see 4 teeny tinies, not tinnies, tinies, if you see 4 teeny tinies, then you know it's going to be a girl. 5 teeny tinies will be a boy. Now, one of the things that a karyotype can tell us is if there's an issue, and this is what can happen. Here is a karyotype that's already been completed, but if you look closely here, this chromosome pair, instead of having 2, has 3, and that's the wrong number. Remember that you have to have 46 chromosomes. If you have something else, then you start to have some issues. In this case, there's 47 chromosomes. Remember I said that your chromosome count is like a very special cookie recipe. If the recipe calls for a teaspoon of salt and you put in a cup of salt, that cookie recipe is not going to be good. Here's an example. So here we have a 3rd chromosome that's not supposed to be there. The technical name is something called trisomy. In this case, trisomy 21, because it's the 21st pair. More commonly, this is called Down syndrome. Down syndrome is the most common chromosome abnormality in humans. It happens about 1 out of 200 births. That's the average. However, as you get older, ladies, your odds of having a Down's baby go up, especially for women who are over the age of 35. If you are over the age of 35 and pregnant, your risk for having a Down's baby is much higher. What does Down's look like? Well, if this is a picture of a Down's person, very typical. Once you've seen someone with Down's, you don't forget it. That's very obvious. Most Down's people have this similar features. Here is another condition which can be determined by a karyotype. If you notice closely this time, the sex chromosomes there's one that's missing. This person is X blank. Now there should be, again, 46. This person has 45 chromosomes. As it turns out, this only happens in females. This only happens in girls, and it is called Turner syndrome. I assume it's named after somebody named Turner. But here you have 45 chromosomes. This is called a monosomy. So you are missing a chromosome. What does a Turner's baby look like? Well, first of all, most babies that have Turners do not complete the pregnancy. Most of the time, mom will have a miscarriage. However, once in a while, and it's very rare, but a Turner's baby sometimes lives. Now here's a girl with Turner syndrome. They are really short. That's one thing. Oftentimes there's some mental retardation. And the other thing is the neck is really, really short. And interestingly, I had a girl in class in California with Turner syndrome. And the other thing, she could take her neck skin and she could pull it way out. Now, I mean, not like way, way out, but I mean, she had like really extra loose skin around her neck. And she was quite an amazing girl considering that she had Turners. Okay, so those are some of the conditions which can be checked and determined with a karyotype. We will also be talking more in class about other things that happen, and I have many karyotypes of individuals from Evansville that we'll be looking at as well. Be sure to add something to your summary, and we will see you next time.